perennial tour here. The focus is going to be on the kind of the grasses and the mixes. It's kind of hard to show differences of a lot of the legumes in pictures. So grasses and mixes, there's lots of differences. So again, welcome everybody. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. And let's just go through this thing, and we'll take questions at the end, I guess. All right, so these pictures are all taken from Oakley Farm, and that's where I live. It's in Christiana, Pennsylvania, which just happens to be close to where the Christiana riot was that started the process of freedom from slavery. And in today's political turmoil, it's kind of interesting to live in a location that actually started that process. And we'll just leave it at that. What you're looking at here is a picture of the perennial plots that most of the pictures are going to be from. And that's kind of in front of those trees in the background. You'll see a stripe down the middle. That stripe is actually a replanted portion of the plots. Remember, whenever we plant something, there is a chance for failure. That part of the plots actually started well, but they died out through a disease. Extreme, well, we're going to say disease and extreme heat last summer. It was just a hard year. And so we picked out some products that did not work. So that's good to know as well. I want to thank Cody and Ashley Humble for taking some pictures. And these plots that we're going to see, most of the pictures were taken on May 8th. There's a few that I'll point out that were not taken on May 8th from some abandoned plots that we kept. So really, what is it? It's the variety that makes the difference. And this is why we do what we do. We have some technology. We have the ability to plant these little tiny plots. I believe they're 6 rows wide by about 12 feet long or so. And we plant those and then we harvest them. And this is our Carter forage harvester that you see in a couple pictures, the green machine. And that is essentially a small flail chopper that we chop each individual plot by hand, by using that machine, and we weigh each individual plot and then dump it on a wagon, and then we take that to a neighbor and feed it to cows, dry cows and heifers. So some differences in varieties. Here you see a shot between 2 Meadow Bromes. Montana did very well at Penn State over the years, but here we got a newcomer, Arsenal. And Arsenal, you can tell that it is a good bit taller. It's about 24 inches versus about 20 or so. And I don't have the yield data back yet, but there is a significant difference between these products. Arsenal was bred in particular for a drought tolerance, believe it or not, out of Oklahoma. And most of the Meadow Bromes are bred out of like Montana, Canada, that type of thing. Here's a shot from above, an above view, and you can actually see a difference in the canopy. The Arsenal on the left is more drooped over, and the Montana on the right is a little more vertical. I'm not saying one's better than the other as far as the canopy goes. As a general rule, sometimes droopy leaves mean there's a little less lignin in there, so there's less rigidity into it. But that's not always true. That's why we test, and we do test. We are going to be testing these plots actually this summer when the forage quality is the lowest. And we'll pick the winners to test, not necessarily the ones in the bottom of the plot. Here's just a shot of a strip trial that Joy worked with one of her dealers in New Jersey, And you'll notice there's something called rough stalk bluegrass. That's on the right side and the left side of the screen. And in the middle, there's very little of that rough stalk bluegrass. Well, what's the difference? The difference was this was a strip trial of Orchardgrass, and the Oakley, which is a very aggressive starter, real nice early variety, was able to outcompete the rough stalk bluegrass, whereas the other variety started a little slower and gave that rough stalk bluegrass a foothold. Here's a shot of different tall fescues. On the left is Martin II Protect, and that is more of a southern type, thicker, stronger particular product, not quite as high a quality, but it handles the extreme south very well, very high yielder. We have Cora in the center, and then we have Bar Optima on the right, and that has a friend of the endophyte in it as well called E34. So Martin II Protect, Cora, endophyte free, and Bar Optima plus E34. You can see just the difference, and when you touch these plants, you can feel the difference as well. Here's another shot, a little closer. You can see the differences in the leaf architecture and the fineness, and if you were able to feel the screen, you would feel that these things have a different texture to them as well. Again, the coarsest on the left and the softest on the right. As a general rule, that does translate into palatability, but not all the time. Sugar contents have a huge role too with that. Okay, I mentioned earlier that one part of the trial that by the way, these were planted last year, last spring, and one part of the trial actually died out through the summer heat and drought due to a combination of the drought and some disease, and we replanted that. And you can see there's a huge difference in the starting ability of these different species and actually within the varieties. The ryegrass Festulolium types are the bigger ones, and these real tiny ones are probably bluegrass. And then we have the meadow fescues and the fescue type Festuloliums that would start a little slower. The taller grass on either side of those photos was the stuff that was clipped off and regrowing from the previous cut. So this is kind of between first cut and second cut when these pictures were taken. Okay, just some comments on meadow fescue. Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture to show it, but we had a bunch of meadow fescues in this trial, and a bunch of them died off, as I mentioned. However, there was one particular variety that looked very good. It was kind of a shame to take it out, but we had to take the whole block out. That's a new one by Barenbrug called Hidden Valley, and it will start showing up in their with the harvest of this year's crop. So I don't know if we'll see it this fall yet or August, but we'll see it next year showing up in our mixtures. So that's an exciting product that extends the range of adaptation. Normally the meadow fescues work fine in my part of the world, southeastern Pennsylvania, but there's certain years, and we've had a few of them in a row, that it is not. So as a general rule, it's very safe to do meadow fescue north of I-80, for example. And the reality is everything that we set as an area of adaptation. And so with the farm in Christiana, we're kind of between what I'll call the northern climates and the more southern climates. And there is, that is dialing in. So we get a good handle in our area. Then we also work with our suppliers and the universities of trying to figure out where things work. And of course, through our dealer network, We are getting feedback from people that say, hey, this one's not working so good, or this one's really doing well. So that's pretty exciting. But we do see differences in our plots, and that's really neat. Now, these pictures were taken from a set of plots that we planted. Let's see, did we plant those in the spring of 2018 or no, 2017, I believe we planted them. And 2018 was a wet year. And part of the plots became swampy. We had a spring develop in part of the plots. So we had to abandon them even though parts were good. So we just let them go. I was like, okay, I don't really have a good use for this land. It has a spring in it. So let's just see what happens. So here's a picture of some of the bromes that you'll see on straight ahead. And to the left is some tall fescues. I'll just take a couple shots just showing some differences. This is Brett Wissant, our representative from Barenbrug, standing in front of HLR. Now, these plots should have been harvested probably a good 3-4 weeks prior to when this picture was taken, but he is standing in front of HLR. What does HLR stand for? High leaf ratio. So you can see in that block right in front of him, there is very little heads, considering this is 2, 3, 4 weeks after it should have been harvested. To both the left and the right are other varieties that were not necessarily bred for high leaf ratio, and they are a little more stemmy. Now, the positive side of having more stems is when it goes to make seed harvest, you actually get more seed off those varieties. So there is kind of a cost associated with less stems. Here is 2 pictures of Artillery Smooth Brome and Carlton Smooth Brome. On the, we'll talk about the picture on the right. So that was taken the same day as that HLR picture. So that was taken in 2019, I believe, was when the picture was taken. That HLR picture was taken in 2019 too. You can see how much bigger the Artillery is, the taller one, versus the Carlton, which is much, much older genetics. And then on the left is my son Harrison, and this picture was taken before heading, and you can see the difference in the crops. Now, Artillery costs more, but Smooth Brome is a crop that you plant for 10 years or more. It will last a long, long, long time. If managed right, it will last probably 40, 50 years if managed right. So that a little bit of cost for a better variety will go a long way. Here's a shot from this year's plots. Top view, Artillery and Carlton, just showing differences. So there are a lot of differences between the varieties themselves. But what do you do with those varieties? Do you just plant straights? As I talked about, there's challenges with all the varieties. You know, we don't know which variety is going to work best on your farm, no matter where you're at. We have a good idea, but can you dial those things into the nth degree for every year? No, there's always going to be some diseases that might come in, and some varieties are stronger at certain varieties and weaker at varieties, but they take their turns on what they're better at and what they're not better at. So that's you know, one example of a variety. Then you look at the species. I mentioned that the meadow fescues and the ryegrass type Festuloliums all pretty well died out last year in our plots. Well, what if we planted all that and we had a bad weather event that took them out? Well, that's not good. There's some great attributes to those products. So we at King's AgriSeeds, we're focused on mixtures. That's a thing that I personally love to do. It's in my background. Actually, I have a background in weed ecology where plants interact with each other, and I use that on a regular basis in working with our mixtures. So we have different things that we like to consider when we're making mixtures. Number one, how's it going to be used? Is it used for grazing primarily, or dry hay, or a wet hay harvest such as baleage or haylage? Are the soils on the drier side? Are they variable? Or are they on the wetter side? So all those things that we need to consider. And what's not on this particular screen is are we talking about Maine or Virginia or Pennsylvania or anywhere in between those sites? There's a difference in locations. We know pretty well which mixes work, and I'm going to talk about that in what locations. Again, every year is different, so, and there is risk in anything that we do, and our job here at King's AgriSeeds is to guide everyone into the best potential products for their area. So I just wanted to go through some of these mixes. And this one is EquiFlex. EquiFlex is a brand new mix for us, and we really designed it for the horse hay market. This happens to be a strong early horse hay that can also be used for pasture. Quite often we have people that say, I want to make first cutting hay and I want to then turn the horses out into it because I need more pasture in the summer. Well, this is what this one was designed for. Obviously, equa means horse for equine, and flex is flexibility in its use. So what did we do with this one? We went with early orchard grasses. We went with Meadow Brome, which is also a early heading plant. Timothy is not necessarily an early heading plant, but people do like to see that in horse hay. And we have Bluegrass in there. Bluegrass is also early. So this, for the most part, is an early mix, and it's something that's new for us. So Joy Beam has been evaluating some of the fields in her area. So maybe at the end of the talk, if anybody has any questions on how it looks, I'll let her comment further. But the photographs that I have seen look pretty strong so far. And by the way, that picture there with the grass, the leaves in the grass, is I can't quite tell. My eyes aren't. Oh yeah, I can see it now. That is actually meadow fescue, and there are little tiny hairs that come out of the side of that plant, and that's pretty unique about meadow fescue. Or smooth brome. Excuse me, meadow brome. Said the wrong term. That is meadow brome. Smooth brome is hairless, hence the term smooth. But that is a very, very soft, nice hay. So we're kind of looking forward. It's also very, very drought tolerant. This is, for the most part, the two top ingredients are very drought tolerant, and the bottom two parts are not. So it will handle a mix of soil. So early and handling multiple soil types. Okay, the next mix, sail topper. Sail topper is another mix that's pretty good for horses. It's essentially a great auction hay, and it's a heavy orchard grass mix. It's late heading orchard grass mixes and Timothy. So this mix is an all grass mix along with the EquiFlex. EquiFlex early, sail topper late. So if you think about it, if you're running a hay farm, it's kind of nice to have spread out harvest windows. Real nice mix and sail topper. It's great auction hay. And here's a shot from on top of it. Grass Pro. Grass Pro is a mix that's going to give us a little more yield because it has tall fescues, and it has both the Cora, which is a northern type, and the soft leaf tall fescues from Barrenbrug in it, along with late heading orchard grasses and Timothy. Again, this one's another late header, higher yield. One thing I will say, it doesn't dry quite as fast as the other two. You're going to need probably another day on it because the tall fescues don't dry quite as fast. But it is a beautiful high yielding mix. There's a shot above it. So it's just a nice looking mix. The next mix is Versa. Versa, honestly, is one of my favorite all-grass mixes for my backyard. It is, and by the way, a lot of these I don't have varieties on, but in the case of the Festuloliums, I'm specifying varieties because there's such a big difference. So Foytan is what we've been selling in the Festulolium world, which is a tall fescue type Festulolium. There was a shortage on this year, so we introduced a new one called Haymaster. It's a little later in maturity. Nice in our new seedings. The idea is they're kind of tall fescue-like plants mixed with orchardgrass. In this case, in the orchardgrass, we have both early and mids in there, and typically early and a mid. And the beauty of this mix is this mix does not have tall fescue in it, in case somebody that has an aversion of tall fescue because it has potential endophytes in it, although everything that King's AgriSeeds sells does not have any toxic endophytes in it. We're either endophyte free or beneficial or novel endophyte. With that said, it's kind of got the yield punch of a tall fescue, but it does not have any tall fescue term associated with it. And we have both early and mids orchardgrass in there, and that just gives you a nicer, kind of the early head kind of says, hey, it's time to cut, but then we got the extreme leafiness of the stuff that's not harvested yet. And in the world of horse hay in particular, it's nice to have a couple heads in there because that's what the horse market actually is looking for. The other thing is this is a real nice mix to put in the big box. All these grass mixes you can put in the large box and put the legume of your choice in a small box. And there's a shot of it being. One other thing I will tell you about this Versa mix is the tall fescue type Festuloliums are not quite as spready or aggressive as tall fescue. So this mix will stay in balance longer. What we'll find is sometimes the tall fescue in a tall fescue orchardgrass mix, the tall fescue will push out the other species, in particular orchardgrass and maybe some other things, and it eventually becomes all tall fescue. In this case, we keep that balance better. When I look at the rows when we plant, tall fescue will fill in between the rows, whereas the Foytan and the high pass tend to stay more within the row, so it's not quite as aggressive. That's maybe good or bad, depending on your perspective. Here's a shot of a 3-year-old stand on my farm, Oakley Farm, and you can see there's a combination of orchardgrass and tall fescue heads out there. And that bluegrass-like looking thing is actually the rough stalk bluegrass that is essentially a weed in this part of the world. The next all grass mix is Alfamate. And Alfamate is very similar to the sail topper. The difference is that we have the high carry Alaska brome added to it. And this mix dries the absolutely easiest of everything that we sell. Beautiful mix. The caution on this mix is the high carry Alaska brome must maintain a high cutting height. 4 inches, no shorter, to maintain that high carry. And it's a very, very fast starter. The high carry Alaska brome almost acts like a nurse crop, similar to oats, not quite as fast as oats, but very quick. Grass-Max. Grass-Max is a more rugged mix. Again, where does it, when I say rugged, it's going to take the south, the southern heat more. We actually adopted this mix from our sister company, Southeast AgriSeeds, and they developed this mix for, you know, hanging in there. So it is 60% Martin 2 tall fescue, and that is with Martin 2 Protect. And again, that's, as we talked about earlier, that's that more southern type hardy material. 20% Innovale, which is a medium maturing orchardgrass, and 20% Oakley orchardgrass. Really strong orchardgrasses bred in Kentucky. Those 2 orchardgrasses I love if you want a strong, aggressive orchardgrass. This mix may not quite have the quality of our other, but it's going to stick in there. So if we're talking about Eastern Shore, New Jersey, sandier parts of New Jersey, parts of Maryland, the eastern part of Virginia, this mix is ideal for those areas. And then if you just want plain solid yield, you're feeding you know, animals that don't require the highest nutrition, it's going to do very well for that area too. Here's an overhead shot. Balancer, very similar to the Grass-Max. Again, designed for the south. The difference in this one is we have red clover and white clovers in that mix. So essentially it is Grass-Max with red clover and white clover mixed in with it. Just a nice mix giving you a good. So I believe we are into adding clovers to our mixes now. This mix here is Hillside, is one that I actually created a long time ago with one of our dealers. And it is a nice mix for drier soils. It is primarily an orchardgrass based mix with a little bit of Meadow Brome, some perennial rye as a nurse crop, and red and white clovers. It can be used for hay as well. Initially designed for grazing, but in some areas they like it for hay as well. So in areas that are adapted to orchardgrass, a strong performer. So I probably wouldn't, well, we could take this south, but it's not going to go quite as far south as Grass Mix and Balancer. And just a reminder, with orchardgrass, we also want to not graze or cut too short. A top view. Beefmaster, tall fescue, perennial ryegrass, orchardgrass, and white clover. A nice mix, primarily designed for beef. Could be for cow-calf. It could be for finishing on grass. I actually use Southern Beefmaster on my farm for grass-fed beef. Also good for dry cows, heifers, that type of thing. In a managed grazing scenario, tall fescue, depending on what they're being fed in the barn, may or may not be appropriate. In the case of beef, we almost never feed anything in the barn. In the case of dairy, it depends on your management whether the tall fescue items are appropriate for a mix. There's an overhead shot. Southern Beefmaster. What we did with this one is we made sure Bar Optima Plus C34, novel endophyte, and the Remington NEA2 ryegrass novel endophyte. These novel endophytes give it a little more summer hardiness and actually a little more winter hardiness. In the case of Southern Beefmaster, we are storing our novel endophytes in our climate control storage room. So you're ensured of getting that better product when it comes to knowing that that endophyte is actually alive. But this one's very similar to the Beefmaster, just slightly different varieties. Oh, the other difference is we have red clover in this guy as well as white clover. Master Paddock, and by the way, the white clover is not included in that. That's a little bit of volunteers that came through. They should have been sprayed out. This mix is an all-grass mix, tall fescue, Kentucky blue, and perennial ryegrass. The perennial ryegrass is the quickest. Tall fescue is in the middle, and Kentucky bluegrass is a slower starter but long-lived. Both the tall fescue and the Kentucky blue should live a long time. There's an overhead picture of it. Again, these mixes all have different looks. Barenbrug mix Browsemaster. This mix is really good for goats, sheep, deer, and it has some forbs in it. It has the chicory in it. The chicory's good for those animals to help with nutritional and worming type scenarios and other health benefits. So there's a touch of tall fescue and there's a touch of alfalfa, but it's just it's a nice mix. And by the way, I should have said earlier, these mixes all can look different when planted and managed under different scenarios. King's Grazing Mix, one of my favorite managed grazing mixes for dairy farms. It's Orchardgrass, and we've switched over several years ago to the early to medium orchard grasses, more than one type, to give us a little more vigor and oomph. So we got the orchard grasses, the perennial ryegrass, little meadow fescue, red clover, white clover, and chicory. By the way, find that I'll take that back. I was thinking we had, Meadow Bromes, which is not in this mix, do show up better. That was in the hillside during the droughts. Here's a shot of that one. Real nice balanced mix. The meadow fescue, and that's really adapted best, I'm going to say Route 80 north. So we're going to maybe lose part of this mix, but for the most part, a strong mix. Northern Energy, as the name implies, we designed this primarily for the north. And this is an all-grass mix. It has a lot of meadow fescue in it, so we want it north of Route 80. It got a little bit of tall fescue in it. It got perennial ryegrass in it, red clover, and white clover. But you can just kind of take a look at that guy. Best, and probably if we looked real close because of the summer that we had, most likely the Meadow Fescue you would struggle to find in this mix at our location, and that's southeastern Pennsylvania. Take it north, that's what it's designed best for. Another one, Creekside, as the name implies, we designed this one for wetter soils, lower ground. It's a perennial ryegrass mix, meadow fescue, bird's foot trefoil, bluegrass, timothy, and white clover. And that guy, again, you know, don't put this one on dry soil. You're going to be disappointed. So keep that in mind. Another beautiful mix for low areas, and I'm going to say don't take this guy south. I'm going to say somewhere Lancaster north, with the understanding that the meadow fescue might fall out in the southern part of Pennsylvania. High elevations as well. Anything I say about north also includes high elevation. So we can get some of these northern products to work in high elevation Virginia, for example. Lowland Hay, beautiful high tonnage product. Cora tall fescue and STF 43 tall fescue, Timothy, and red clover. Even though this says lowland hay, it is primarily designed for lowland. Because the tall fescue is in there and the red clover, you can take it other places. And this guy cranks. A very impressive yielder. Another shot of it from above. Milkway is 6% meadow fescue, 40% softleaf tall fescue. I'm going to say this mix is best adapted to Route 80 north or high elevation. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful all grass mix for digestibility. It's not going to yield as much as some of the other things, but it's still going to have very good yield, and it's going to have extreme quality for an all grass mix. Green Fast. This mix was originally introduced for a quick starter or a repair for weak fields. And it does have Perseus Festulolium in it. Perseus is a ryegrass type. Quick get up and go. Orchardgrasses, perennial ryegrasses, red clover and white clover. Again, the Perseus and the perennial ryegrass and the red clover got the get up and go. The orchardgrass gives it some more stability. So if you're in too far south for a ryegrass type Festulolium, that the Perseus, for example, might fall out after a year or two. If you're in a beautiful grass area, such as the Finger Lakes area or Vermont or Lake Erie, kind of up there, this thing will just crank for a long time. I tend to think of it as a shorter-lived mix, but up there they'll argue with that. They'll say it's a very long-lived mix. Beautiful, quick mix, high quality. This is another picture from above. It's our fastest starting mix that we have. NutraMax. This mix was designed by one of our dealers that's a nutritionist. And the concept is you mix alfalfa and red clover together, and it gives you a great stability of protein when you go to feed it in stored feed. And then we have meadow fescue and two types of Festuloliums in that. We have the ryegrass type Festulolium, and we have the tall fescue type Festulolium. And of course, we have white clover in there. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mix. This mix, other than the meadow fescue, can go pretty much Pennsylvania north. Excuse me, the meadow fescue, yeah, a little shaky in southern Pennsylvania, but the rest of it, Route 80 north, is really, 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 really good. Excellent for putting in a TMR mix, just driving milk production and that type of thing. And it would be also very good for part of a diet to finish meat on. An overview of that guy. Again, these pictures were all taken from her plots right at harvest time. Here's the Haymaster, a nice mix. One thing that with our alfalfa mixes that had grasses in it, for some environmental reason, I think it was a little dry or something when we started, the alfalfa was a little thinner than normal. We would normally see just a little more alfalfa in this than what we're showing here. Same with that NutraMax. So this is an alfalfa, Orchardgrass, Alaska Brome, and Timothy. It's essentially alfalfa, 35% alfalfa with Alfamate is essentially how that guy is put together. Nice, fast, drying mix. And it is one of those auction hays that brings top dollar. Beautiful, beautiful mix. Because it has the Alaska Brome in it, we like to see it cut at 4 inches of height. Performance Max. This one is supposed to be a higher, well, a 70% alfalfa and tall fescue blend. Again, normally we would have a little more alfalfa in this than what we got in this particular stand. But a shot of Performance Max. North Star, as the name implies, this is designed for the north. I'll define that again as Route 80 further north, or maybe even further. This is 85% alfalfa, 7 or 8% meadow fescue, 7 and 8% the tall fescue type Festuloliums. And the nice thing about changing these percentages of alfalfa, as we go, say, from the north, grasses just thrive. And it doesn't take very much grass to just fill in and give you the right amount. Matter of fact, quite often the grasses are too heavy. So we put in less aggressive grasses in this. If I plant this mix in New York, for example, it should be nicely balanced. But if I bring it down here or further south, you're going to have a hard time finding the grasses. So again, we try to regionalize these mixes. So a shot from the top. Again, we should have more alfalfa in this than what we said. It's kind of like what I just said. You say, what are you talking about, Tim? There's a lot of grass in there. Not normally. Again, we had a poor start of the alfalfa for some reason. Highland Hay. This has a 60% alfalfa in it. And notice it says Kingfisher alfalfas. We rarely ever use one alfalfa with that same concept of multiple varieties for various reasons of adaptability. Typically, we're putting 2 to 3 alfalfas in all these mixes. So we have, in this particular case, we tend to use stronger drought-resistant alfalfas, ones that are more tap-rooted, as opposed to a branch root or combination of branches and taps. Tall fescue and orchardgrass. So again, we would normally see a lot more alfalfa in this mix, but it just was the year that it started, and sometimes that happens. Okay, back to an all grass mix. No, excuse me, a Hay Pro. 35% alfalfa. Orchardgrass, tall fescue, and Timothy. Again, not much. We would normally expect to see a lot more alfalfa in this mix. It's in there, but the grasses, for some, well, again, they won out. So this is essentially Grass Pro with alfalfa added to it. Nice high quality mix. And I put this slide in here to just to re-emphasize, when we're working with mixtures, cutting height is huge. This is a double reciprocating mower. The actual bar is made in Germany by a company called ESM. It's adapted in the United States, kind of hooked to behind my tractor by a local company called I&J Manufacturing, and this cuts grass, and it cuts grass really good. You can adjust the height of this thing. I have mine set for approximately 5 inches, and I can sail through heavy grass at too fast of a speed. You gotta wear your seatbelt if you push your limits, which I do not recommend, especially if you hit a groundhog hole or something like that. But it cuts very well, and it does a clean cut. If you see that picture with, I believe that's my hand, you can actually see the ends of those plants that are standing there are very clean cut. If I looked at what Tracy harvests with, and Cody with the flail chopper, Carter Harvester flail chopper, it tears their ends. So we want a clean cut, and we want to leave enough material there for a very, very fast regrowth. And you will be amazed at how fast things will regrow if you cut them relatively high and because it's not laying on the ground. It will also reduce ash, which is dust, soil contamination from the soil. So you can rake, you can get less contamination in your hay, which will feed your animals better. So this piece of equipment's not that expensive, and it's very fast. I happen to have a 9-foot cutting bar, but in Europe they have these things adapted to hook on top of all kinds of piece of equipment that is part of their cutting unit. They even have them mowing mountainsides behind, like a what do you call those things? Those walk behind mowers. So yeah, cutting height is critical. By the way, if you, in a mixture, if you're getting too many grasses versus your legumes, we should lower the cutting height. If for some reason your grasses are struggling and we want more, we should raise our cutting height and put nitrogen fertility on to boost your grasses. So again, we can plant something, but our management will determine how it ends up looking. And of course, beyond management, you got weather at time of planting is huge. Weather at time of early establishment is huge, and any other weird weather events can alter a stand dramatically. That kind of includes my slideshow from our farm here in Christiana, Oakley Farm. And I appreciate everybody listening.